Welcome to True House Stories. I'm coming out of New York City. You know, at times I focus the cameras across the ocean, pull the microphones out to talk to people in the UK. We've gone all over the world, Australia, Asia, you name it, all over the United States. And right now, I'm taking the microphone camera and I'm pointing it to Boston. He no longer lives in Boston, but TC knows where I'm going to go. And one of his close friends, if I remember correctly, Linda named him TC, or helped. She told the story of how this man became what we call a top cat. And why? He's got that ego-driven position for greatness. He will find it. He'll push what he needed to get it out. And even today, you know, he's fighting for artists and royalties. But back long time ago, when horse and carriage was floating around, there was a thing called the first generation DJ. And I'm talking, now we're going into late 60s when he was back at college at Northeastern University. Check this out, right? So he's working on, if I remember correctly, an engineering degree. You know, which he came out and accomplished doing something within 8 months, building a massive apartment building, and turned around and said, you know what? I ain't doing this no more. Why? Because like every DJ, record producer, they get a chance to see that moment where you walk in a room and you see somebody doing something with music, turntables. It could have been you could saw David Mancuso. It could have been you could have saw Francis Grasso. But he went to a place and said to the guy, you know, I like what you're doing. You know, if you ever need any help, here's my number. Not thinking he was ever going to get a call. A week later, guy winds up quitting and says, call this guy, John Linguini Luongo. And his life changed from night to day. He now decided that he was going to do something, no longer be at an architect job or dealing with construction or any of that kind of other stuff, which, look, he's brilliant. He went into a studio not knowing too much and came and made humongous hits. For example, we were talking about this. He took salt shakers and spoons to make additional percussion parts when there was a time when, let's say, for example, Tom Moulton would hear the multi-track and he would extend and mix it and refine it to make the Tom long versions, because in those days the major labels and companies were making what we call the 7-inch short versions, and DJs were playing these short versions to their dance crowds. He saw it differently. And because of DJing, experiencing the crowds, and doing what he did in the beginning. Now, mind you, you know, nowadays you got Google. You can go and type, how did the first DJs do it? And it'll tell you. But at that time, there was no, let me go check a reference book and say, oh, that's how we did it? Oh, wait a minute, there's a sync button to mix? No, you had to kind of know what you were doing. You had to work at it. It took time. It took practice. You know, you had those moments where the mixes weren't right when you were DJing, but you know what? You got past that. So without further ado, and I'm so happy to call this man a really good friend. Bless him that he's going strong, he's healthy, and he's got vigor, and he's got that chutzpah. The top cat himself, my man, John Luongo, right here on True House Stories. God bless him. Right?
Hey, Lenny boy. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
I'm so glad, because I've been asked for the last 3-4 years, when you getting John Luongo on? I said, I'm working on it. And bless you that you said yes. I said, John, because, you know, people want to hear that story. You know, I know we read about it, but nobody tells the story better than the person that lived it.
That's very true.
I hope I got the stuff right.
I think you did a very good job. Matter of fact, I was sitting on the edge of my chair to see how my life was going to work out, and thank God it worked out all right. I said, I hope, oh God, this sounds like it could be interesting. I hope, oh my God, and he left school. I mean, Lenny, you'll appreciate it that one of the high points in my life was when I finally made the decision. I was just finished an 8-story, 175-unit apartment building in Westboro, Mass. And I broke the record. It went up in 11 months. And I wasn't trying to break the record. I just didn't really, I was just out of school. The project manager was a drunk. So I was scared out of my mind. They go, oh, Jesus, I got to take all this responsibility on. And we just zipped it up. And the company I was working for, AJ Lane Construction, said to me, we're going to take you to Worcester and you're going to build a 22-story building. And they were going to double my salary. So, it's a lot of money back then. I could have made $500, but from $250. So I said to myself, nah, I'm not gonna do this. And then I said, I gotta do what I really love. And I was spinning records not only through college, but afterwards when I was still an engineer, and I would go in and I play records at the Townhouse. And finally I decided, no, I'm going to leave this. I don't want to do this. So I had to go home and tell my parents. And I promised my mother, I said, look, I promise I'd go to college, I'd graduate, and I'd work. And I did it. And now I'm going to leave. What are you going to do? I'm going to go mix records. Well, you can imagine telling an old Italian mother who had to teach herself how to speak English. She thought I was going to go on and be a Hamilton Beach blender. And I said, no, that's not exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going to do DJing because I love.
What do you mean a DJ? What do you mean a DJ? I heard that same story. What are you going to be on the corner with the thing and throwing the change at you? What are you, crazy?
Coming from your background, you'll appreciate her comment to me was, I wish you were going to be a garbage collector because I know what they do. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, just trust me. And my dad would say, oh, I hope you're going to make some money at it. I said, well, I took a half a pay cut. Because it went for 125 down to 125 doing it, but I loved it. And and back then there were pioneers. I mean, everything we did was the first time ever. Forget DJs. I mean, it was the Wild West. It was like you had to learn how to mix. You had to learn whether you were going to. I invented a thing called a quick cut, which is you do a drum roll. Everybody else would do long layered mixes and things like that. I was very rhythmically oriented, and so I would use a drum roll in one record and slip in the drum roll at the end of the drum roll of another, bam, and it was gone. It was called quick cutting, and I was effortless with this. And in the beginning, when I was at the first place I worked at, which was called the Townhouse, which is if you look at Cheers on TV and you'll see the Bull and Finch, upstairs is a place called the Townhouse. And that's
wait. So everybody on the television show, it said more seating upstairs, the arrow. That was where the club was, where he played.
That was it. So we had 2 Resco turntables, which are great because those are really strong. They're like bulls, like 2 Clydesdales. You push them and they go. And I had those at the radio station. But the only thing that I was missing, and DJs will appreciate this, well, let's see, there was no headset. So you could not hear what you were going to be playing. You couldn't listen to the one off air as the other one was on the air. So what I had to do was go in early to the club, take my records, and I, go until I heard the first scratch, black magic marker, quarter of a turn, 1, hit the button, music. So I knew that in 2 seconds I could have that song. Music could play. And I did that, and then I learned how to just put up that first initial hit, go back a quarter of a turn as the music was playing on the other turntable, and they would never hear it. The audience had never been able to hear things like the full version of Steely Dan, Do It Again, which when it came out was like part 1 and part 2. You had to wait for the album for the whole thing to came out. And when I did it, I said, you know what? No, I can do this. So I do like the Isley Brothers, Who's That Lady? And and we would use Steely Dan. And I would take these songs and people would hear the long version of them before they even came to the market. So that became an incentive. Plus, I had the people going crazy there. I mean, I had a great sense of music and all different kinds of music, because growing up, I had my sister, who was much older. She was playing Edie Gourmet and Sergio Franchi and Johnny Mathis, and my brother was playing Frankie Avalon and Duke of Earl, and and all of these other records. And I wanted to play Led Zeppelin. So I mean, I had every kind of music basically embedded in me somewhere in the back of my mind, which gave me a great musical palette to be able to play songs from. I'm grateful for my brother and sister, because it's enabled me to make the transition from doing dance music into just doing pop music and rock music and every kind of music that I wanted to.
You kind of gave us the prelude. Now, 1968. Okay, but let me just ask this question, and then what I'm going to do is I ask the question, I'm going to pull out, and I'm going to let Cameron focus on you. We know that you did what you did, going to Northeastern University and, becoming an engineer. And, God bless you, have all that education, and also to say goodbye to that, to come into a place that's, even at the time you did, it was nerve-wracking, let's just say, because it was brand new. Like you said, there was nothing to look back at. There was no formal business as we know it today. But at that time, you're a kid living in an Italian household, young kid. How does music find you? Because I know rock must have been very prevalent, and AM radio was the sound. FM wasn't even around yet.
Yeah. I would listen to WRKO and would listen to the songs they were playing, and I just the great thing about pop music in the beginning was that pop music was everything. They would take the best country song, they would take the best R&B song, they would take the best funk song, they would take the best ballad, and so you'd get to hear them all beside each other. So you would hear like a Dolly Parton or a country song, you'd hear an Elton John, you'd hear like Jay Giles, you would hear not Def Leppard, you would hear Led Zeppelin, and it really gave you an idea of, look at these songs can all live in this wonderful format by themselves, which was great, because it enabled me to say, well, why can't I take an element of this and put it with that? That was a great training course for me, because I said, I can take the bottom end of funk, I can take the power of rock drums, I can take the melodic aspects of an Elton John, and then I can take some of the some of the soul keyboards and digital synthesize and put them together. So I started to recreate ideas from listening to all that pop music. It was a great way to learn music. And when I was in the clubs and I started to go there, there was no club music. What's club music? There was nothing that was said, okay, there's no 12 inches, there was no dance music. There were songs you could dance to. And then what I would do is I would record a 7-inch on my little cassette player and record it up to a certain part and stop. And then I would put another record on at the right point. I would release the pause button. And while it wasn't a perfect splice, you could get an idea of how the tempos and how the tonality of those songs was going to match up. So I was able to say, okay, this song will go with this song. I can play Free Ride by Dan Hartman, and maybe it can go into this. And so that's how I started to teach myself. Eventually, I got to the point where I would actually take the cassette tape out and splice it with the scissors and then put a piece of Scotch tape behind it. And then I'd hear what a really effortless, seamless mix sounded like. So that was kind of like a lot of fun. And one of the things we did early on was you'd go to a few of the clubs. There weren't a lot of them in there, but there was a club like Zelda's in Boston where I would go into the club and you'd hear this DJ, Andrew Ruskowski, and he would go once a week, travel in New York, and buy these great little records, like I'll Bake Me a Man, or Remember the Stranger, or I Like What I Like by Everyday People. And you would see the audience getting off on these, and he was the worst DJ in the world. I mean, he's a great guy, but he sounded like two Mack trucks smashing each other. But I learned something very valuable, that the right song at the right time is better than a seamless, wonderful mix. Because a seamless, wonderful mix doesn't always give you excitement and doesn't capture the crowd. And you gotta play for the audience. You can't come in with these pre-programmed sets. like a lot of these DJs started doing later on. It's like, you know, they program them on a plane, then they come in, they press play, and they put their hands in the air. What the hell's that about? That's ridiculous. So
we want to know, are you trained musically with any instrument?
I am trained. I was trained. When I was a kid, I played guitar, and and I sucked. Nope. I want to tell you, I was great, but I took many years of guitar, and it wasn't for me. I mean, I got the calluses on my finger. I could play. It taught me a lot because I was able to tell people I don't like this and don't like that. But I was smart enough to realize that from being able to play the instrument and read the music, I said, you know what? I may not be able to play it the way I want to, but I certainly have the ability to tell other people to play what I want them to play. And that's what I would work with Paul Pesco and countless other people in the studio, Phil Ashley, keyboard players, because I knew exactly what I wanted. You know, I mean, had I had the information now that back then, I would have been co-writer on many of these songs, because I came up with so many of the lines you hear on a lot of the songs. I came up with all the structures. I mean, I was the first guy, Lenny, who went in the studio, and I said, like Tom Moulton took a recording and he extended it. He took the 24 track, whatever was there, he'd knock a vocal out, he'd make the keyboard a little nicer, and he put a section in for 2 minutes and extended the record. I said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to add, I have to have the ability to add any instrument I want. I want to have full authority to put percussion on these, and then I'm going to have I want full authority to rearrange records. So where Tom would take a recording, and basically all you heard is the way it used to flow. Maybe he added a little bit in the intro. You just heard it flow exactly as it was as a 7-inch, just longer. With me, I said, no, we're going to take something from the end, put it at the beginning. I'm going to change the structure. I'm going to put a break here. And it's a little known fact, well, actually more people are finding out now. I was on every single record I ever recorded. Somewhere on every record. I am like the Alfred Hitchcock of music, because I'm on the Jacksons, I'm on Patti LaBelle, I'm on Aerosmith, I'm on Van Halen, I'm on John Wayne. I'm either clapping, playing percussion, doing something, some strange little sound, like on Santana we had One Chain, Don't Make No Prison, which I did, and we had a chain, shaking the chain, going left and right. On one song, I had a hi-hat that was a spray can. Pss, 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 pss. On one song, we had a camera, a digital camera, and it was Snapshot by Dolores Hall that was co-produced by Bob Thiel Jr. and Mark Kamens, my late ex-wonderful friend. And I did that mix for them, and that did really good. So I would walk into every session, and I'll never forget this. I would tell my engineer, Michael, and Jimmy Milne, the percussionist, who was the greatest percussionist that ever lived, I would clap my hands and say, okay, today we have to have one song on this recording that's never been heard by human ears. And that would be the way we would start every session. It had to be fun. It had to be innovative. We never sat on our laurels. I refused to, even if I found out, like, you know, you're a DJ in a club and you're playing it, Lenny, and all of a sudden you know that this song's going to go to this song, going to go to this song, and into a combination of a peak song, and the audience is going to go nuts. Well, I didn't mind doing that, but I refused to do it every time. So even if I would mix a song and had a certain structure or pattern that I was achieving on that song, my engineer would say, okay, we're going to go with the vocal now. I said, no, I don't want to do the vocal. And whoop, I'm gone. And he said, we always put the vocal here. I said, well, we don't put it here today. I said, Michael, if you don't want to do it, you get up and I'll do it. And the song in particular that did this, which actually I can honestly say the intro on this song changed every intro after in the dance clubs. It was This Time Baby by Jackie Moore. We started to build, went to a certain section, and he said, all right, the vocal's coming in now. I said, no. He said, what are we doing?
Let me stop you for a second.
No,
I want to ask you
on a roll.
I'm going to ask you the technical part of it now. When you say rearrange records, did you have to sit there and do passes with the mutes record it to the half track, and then later cut these records on the half track to make a full 12-inch mix.
Yeah. Yes.
Because people don't know that. They think you're getting a 3.5, 4-minute version off a 2-inch tape, and you're doing additional stuff on there. You're playing the claps and stuff, making the additional percussion.
Yeah.
But then you're also saying, wait a minute, this is pre-digital, so there's not like you can move a section with a mouse.
No, you couldn't.
You have to make sections from the parts of it. You have to explain that a little bit.
Well, what you did is, for instance, I would listen to the recording and I'd say, all right, we would go through the recording and I'd say, all right, here's what I want. Talk to Jimmy Mill and I'd say, I'd like to put a conga here. And he'd play a couple of beats. I said, no, that's terrible. Let's try this one. Yeah, that's it. That's what I want. He one time asked me early on, he said, are you a percussionist? I said, no. I said, I just know what I want to hear. So, that's where the musical background came in. But what we'd have to do is I would have to talk about pre-planning, okay? It's not like today where you can digitally fly things in and have them all there and press the button. Forget it. Everything had to be done on the spot. As you were recording the record, you recorded a section onto 2-track tape, either 1/4 or 1/2 inch. Stop it. Say, all right, let's go back and do the next section. Now let's splice that together. Yeah, that works. And I would have to take a section in the record, maybe one time where there was a vocal verse there, right? There was a vocal verse. And I'd say, all right, knock this vocal out there right now. Let's record this as if the vocal's not there. Jimmy, I want a different kind of a beat. I want a tambourine. I want some percussion. I want a sin drum to come in here so that when I go back and edit it the second time, I'll use that same section where there was a vocal. But this time, I'll drop the vocal out, and it will sound like it was intended to be a breakdown. Now, that's very hard because these records had some of them weren't cut to click track, so you had to go up and down because they were organic and cut live. So I had to anticipate what I was going to need, the instrumentation I was going to need, and where I was going to knock things out as I'm recording the overdubs. You have to be very, very organized in order to be able to do that. And then I would splice it all together and change the whole concept of the song, and I would say, well, I want this to happen here. I'll give you a great example of that. In Huey Lewis, I Want a New Drug, there's no horns in the beginning of that song. They didn't come in until once in the end. I said, no, this ain't gonna be. We're gonna redo this. Take that section at the end. Let's splice it in now. We got to a certain point at the beginning. Stop the tape. Go to the end section where the horns come in. Drop them in. At the end of that section, go back to the beginning of the song where Huey would sing, and let's slip him in so people think it's and I want a new drug, and that was not what it was. So I would create things that weren't there, and frankly, it came very natural. I don't even know why. I do believe you can learn some of this stuff, Lenny, but you have to have a gift from God. Most people will tell you that are really good, like Quincy Jones, who was my hero. You couldn't go into.
Well, that's what makes you the genius that you are for this. This is why I wanted you to explain this, because, we've read articles over the years about what you've done, but to hear you explain it clearly, it really hits home.
Yeah.
Like the Vertigo Relight My Fire.
Oh,
I mean, right. We want to hear that story because let me assume I know this, and maybe I'll be corrected.
Go ahead.
Tom Moulton said to me, Dan played most of the instruments himself. He was very gifted.
Yes.
Okay, because he mixed instant replay. So I'm going to assume in Dan's garage, he tracked those parts that you got from him, Relight My Fire. All of them except having Lita Holloway sing and whatever the female background singers, because that's him singing on there.
Right.
So you hear the radio edit, I presume, whatever the demo mix of Relight My Fire. And who approaches you? Does Dan approach you? Or was it Sony Epic? I forget. Blue Sky Records is to Epic or Sony or CBS? Yeah, CBS.
Blue Sky Records was a subsidiary of CBS. It was CBS Associated. And the president was a guy named Steve Paul, who had a place called Steve Paul's The Place, and it was great. It had all the top people in the world would come there to perform. It was unbelievable. And so he came to me because Tony Martell said, we have John Luongo over here who's doing stuff for us. And I met him, and he said that Dan was going to break out in his own and really try to do some really interesting things. And Dan and I, we met and we hit it off great. I mean, we went to Media Sound together, and Dan tracked most of those things. We did have some outside percussion from Jimmy that came in there and worked on that. We also, one of the funny stories is you have Edgar Winter in there was playing on the track, and Dan told me at one point he asked when he was recording it, he asked Edgar, could you go and see if the tape is moving because I'm not hearing anything. And all of a sudden he goes, oh. So what Edgar did at Dan's house called Schoolboy, the schoolhouse in Connecticut, Edgar bent over and he had a tie on. So his tie got stuck. And Dan came in and Edgar was spinning around over the tape. And that was a funny thing. And so when Dan came, we talked about what we're going to be doing. I listened to it. And I said, here's what I want to do. I want to have it focus on this. I remember we used a Cooper time cube on the kick drum, which was unbelievable because one of the best songs at the time was Found the Cure by Ashford and Simpson. And they had a really killer kick-ass kick drum. And Dan really liked it. And I said, I think we can do better. So we got this old piece of gear way back, and we just stuck it on the kick drum. What it does is it takes the kick drum and it moves it out of phase just a tiny bit, so it sounds like a double punch without clouding, and it just blew Dan away. And then, little by little, as we did in the other ones, we went to a certain point, stopped the tape. I arranged it. I arranged all of the stops. And at one point, like early on, where there's a relight my fire, a little bit of a drum break, I extended that. And she says, I don't know if we want to do that. I said, we definitely want to do it. So it was me against Dan and Michael Barbiero. I said, this is what we want to put in there because this will work. This is what a DJ would want to hear. And it's not predictable. Not everything has to be on the floor. Sometimes you want to be able to come in an offbeat and create excitement. And finish the recording. Dan loved it. I did every track on the album, by the way. I did Free Ride. I did, Love Making Love. Every single...
Wait.
No, I'm not doing it.
Rewind the tape, the 2-inch.
Yeah.
When you first heard the demo, was that instrumental introduction that way, or you guys did that and told Dan, we're going to do it like this?
It was, we had it.
Ba, all the parts, the string sections, all that. Because nobody knows what the hell happened, because all we knew is the record came, this is it.
Yeah.
So.
Dan had some of the parts on there. But the way we redid it, and the way that when he was there for everything, we were at Media Sound upstairs in the lounge, and that's where that whole thing was mixed on the little API console that actually Prince later bought for his studio. So I did all my I did Melba Moore, Patti LaBelle, the Jetsons, everything was upstairs in that little studio, and because we get great sounds, and I knew that room cold. But when we came and we did that instrumental in the beginning, there was some of it was there, some of it we had to create because he didn't have all of the balances that he wanted. I said, this is the way we should have it. Let's make the string section stronger here. Let's get those Norman Harris horns going. Let's see if we can get a little bit of this percussion happening. It was done on the fly. Everything that we did was on the fly with that record. So we would look at the console and, Michael, I got this and this, you get this and this, and I try something. And sometimes I would tell them what I was going to do, and sometimes, Lenny, I wouldn't, because I wanted to see if my instinct was right. And the only way you find out if it's right is to do something that somebody's not anticipating you're going to do, and then do it and see if their face falls off the floor. Now, sometimes it could work out bad, and their face looks at you like, you're a 5-headed monster. And other times they go, whoa! More often than not, on that particular track, it was whoa. And the thing that we did when we finished it, I remember I knew he had done something great. I was just so sure. And back at that particular point in time, if you remember, a lot of DJs were just starting to the point where they wanted to remix things, you know. So you put a recording out and you wanted to remix it. So I started to say to myself, I remember saying, you know what? I got an idea here. I want to go in the studio and remix. I already knew it was going to go number one. I without being cocky, you know when you hear something and you go, that's it. It's a friggin' national anthem. And when I play it for people, DJs like Steve Bogan and everything said, John, this is the greatest song of all time. I said, could be. You know, and I love the way Lolita came in and everything. I mean, we really had great reverbs and delays. But I said, I want to redo this song and put it out and not let anybody know that I'm the one who redid it. So we're going to call this one Vertigo Relight My Fire, the progressive mix. I came up with all of these names. The first time you ever saw additional production on a record from a DJ was me. There was no such thing because nobody ever did it. So I used to be mixed and mixed by John Luongo. Then it would be mixed and edited. Then it would be additional production mix and edited because I wanted to take control of these things because when they were given to me, my job was you have to make it better than our best shot with months and years of oversight. And we want to see if you can make it stronger than we've had all of this time to live with it. And you've got a week. So remember, most of the time when I hear these, I'm hearing them once. I have to go in the studio, figure out what I have to do with it. Then I've got a week to mix it. Do the overdubs and mix it. I don't have a half a year like they had. So I didn't mean to get off track. But I said, I want to redo this track. I want to remix it, rebalance it. But I'm going to take a different approach on it. I'm going to make it sparse. I'm going to make it powerful. I'm going to be very, very percussive in the keyboards. I'm going to have things popping in and out and make that dun 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 dun. I wanted to make it aggressive as hell. I wanted it to sound like almost like a jazz record in some ways, you know, an angry, crazy jazz record. So we put it out, and I tell them not to put my name on it. I make sure CBS, I said, do not put my name in this record. Let's just release it as the Vertigo Relight My Fire progressive mix. Don't you know that the progressive mix knocks my other mix out from number one? And I'm saying, ain't this a pisser? So I finally get the pleasure of knocking myself out of number one with another track that I did that nobody knew I did. And I believe that's the first time that happened. You know, and it was just such a great ride on that.
Oh, let me tell you, if people always ask me what's one of the greatest disco records or dance records, and out of my mouth, energy, story, feeling, Relight My Fire.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
And that's the truth. I've told Ray Caviano's asked me over the years. I said, Relight My Fire. I mean, a lot of us believe that because of how long the record is and now, mind you, there was Madeline Kane's Rough Diamond, Forbidden Lover, those 10, 14, Jim Burgess was doing long mixes too. But that record crossed everybody.
You know,
but why did it go wrong in the sense, why did it never become that commercial hit? What the hell did CBS do wrong?
What they did wrong was that they had other records that they made priorities at that time. And this record was making it on its own. It had to make all its own noise. They weren't sure about Dan Hartman in the beginning, you know. They weren't going to be helping him as a solo artist. But all of a sudden, they found out that this thing had traction, was growing through all the clubs, and was going number one everywhere. What they didn't do is they didn't put a proper promotional campaign where they gave the spiffs that they usually give, where they took it out to all the radio stations and built that base around middle America. Because had they done that, that record could have easily been a number one record. It was a great, uplifting, powerful song. I mean, if you think about it, you know, Free Ride was an amazing song that Dan did too, and that became a pop hit. But they just never put the juice behind it that they should have. And I was really disappointed in them for that. and I thought they let it slide. But you know, we got our revenge later because Dan then did "I Can Dream About You," which wow, that went through the roof. And then
Yeah, on MCA, that was a massive hit.
And then he came out with a little ditty, and he brought me in, and I said, "Oh yeah, we can make this a hit." And Tina Turner's "Simply the Best," so that was considered that was Tina's biggest record, believe it or not. And I did that one, and so you know, secretly we got our revenge later on, you know, and it's not about revenge; it's just.
No, you know what it is? You're going against the factor of the industry. Yeah. You know, the Rolling Stones are priority one. When you look at the situation and what was going on, Dan Hartman, yes, he's great. We love him. And the disco clubs and the gay clubs were all making an anthemic record.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, if you got a Led Zeppelin album coming out, who are they going with?
Right. And I'll tell you something else, which nobody thinks about, Len, which is, if you think about this in the proper sense, what you had a lot of independent promoters out there who were making their bread and butter off of doing, you know, this rock promotion and making a ton of money, getting paid up the kazoolie for P1s, parallel ones, which your audience may not know. Parallel ones is the most popular station. P2s is a little bit less of a market share. P3s are small, but you put them all together and they start to build, so you can build a prominent campaign for radio programmers to say, yeah, we want to play this record. So they saw a record coming along that was building on its own without having to be payoff, without having to get the payoff and the money. They didn't want to really see that record do extremely well, did they? Because it would prove that that recording could do good without them. See, dance music is
sure.
Really
yeah, I can see that.
Because we made hits where we didn't get paid for, because the DJs didn't take payola. The DJs did it for the love of the art, the love of the crowd, the love of the music, and they pushed it and promoted it. We didn't need to get payoffs. We were just great at what we did, you know. And then when I say we, not just me, I'm talking about all the DJs.
I know what you mean, because it's the love of the music, and a lot of them was the driving force. Here's a question I'm thinking about as you're talking about being paid.
Yeah.
Now, the services of you as a remixer, producer, remixer, aside from being a DJ, like for example, I know Tom always said this: I took the same amount of money for every mix I did, with a couple of points. Did you have that option as well, or did you just have a straight, this is my fee, and you just handed over the masters after the remixes were done?
Well, I was very young at the time, so I was one of the youngest people doing this. And at that particular point in time, we didn't have that option early on. Later on, I finally got some points on these things, but in the beginning part of it, I would do it just for a fee. You know, we do it for a fee. And, you know, you got to look at it from my point of view. I'm getting to work with these artists. And they're some of the artists I grew up on, and some of the artists I loved. And I'm over there participating with them. So I'm thinking, wow, this is great. I'll give you a story. How much do you think I get paid on You Stepped Into My Life?
Honestly?
Yeah.
I bet you did on spec.
No. But
close enough, right?
Because I went in the studio, they hired me to do this, but I did it for the grand sum of $250. And I was just so happy.
Now hang on. Let's take the $250 before you tell the story. How many hours from the moment the master of tapes were handed to you to when you handed back the masters in time work?
Okay, I went in the studio, went into Media Sound, got the multi-track in there, booked the studio. We worked for about 8 hours doing overdubs. So I went in there, so 8 hours to do the overdubs, and then we worked on the track for another, let's see, the whole thing was about 20 hours. I think it was about another 12, 13 hours. So about 20, 21 hours, right? So I got $250 for 21 hours of not only deciding what had to be on the track and putting the overdubs on there, determining the sound of the record, doing certain things to make the sounds better. We didn't have any samples back then, so you'll appreciate this, and maybe your audience will, in that the sound of the kick wasn't that good. and the sound of the snare was not that good. And I said, like, it's got to be better. I mean, so I went there, clapped. They did my clapping, and that was great. But we took the snare from the actual 24 track, and we fed it to a microphone that we fed to an Auratone. Auratone is a little like, 6x6 inch speaker. Put that speaker on top of a snare, a real snare, and mic'd underneath the snare, so that every time the snare on the recording that was actually there went into the Auratone and hit the snare drum, it would go a little bit of a snap to it. So I did that for the whole track, and it made the track a lot better. And so we had to do that, and then we had to do the arranging, and then I had to do the mixing, and I had to do the different versions. They want me to do the 12-inch, but I would always do a 7-inch version because I came from a radio background. I was a radio DJ at one point, and I knew what I was dealing with when they gave me the original. I said, I can make this sound better than this, and that was a really important thing. By the way, I think if I have a contribution, which I think I have given to the music industry, it was showing the people in radio and at the record labels that if you took a dance sensibility, which was, daring, no fear, jump in the net will appear, do anything, nothing is off bounds, and you put that into the actual recording and release that as a 7-inch, you're going to do better, because that 7-inch will challenge the listener, will have great array of like surprises, and be very powerful. My 7-inches always sounded better than any of the 7-inches that they came from. That's why I made them. And they did.
Okay, so 2 technical questions. When I was mixing the radio edits, we would do panning would be more 12 o'clock because the labels wanted the records to be in your face.
Right.
So you know how we pan heavy when you're doing those dance mixes. So were you making everything 12 o'clock-ish for the radio edits?
Nope.
And the second part is to the question, because I know you have a photogenic memory. When you were doing the PO invoices for, say, your $200,
yeah, Michael
and media had to be paid.
Oh yeah, they were making.
There's no way you're paying out $200 for you, media, sound, and Michael Barbiero. Everybody can't get paid, and the percussion player, and this guy. It's like you got to have something to work with.
Media was getting like $250 an hour. Michael was making a great engineering fee over there. He probably made more than me as far early on. And Jimmy Malin, I would put him in a double scale because I thought he was the greatest, percussionist ever. So he'd walk away with a session. He'd walk away about $800. So, so Johnny was a little light on the monetary funds, but never once did I begrudge anybody that I was working with, because I thought that they were giving me their very best they could. And that's all I asked. Really, if you were me at that particular point in time, Lenny, you start thinking, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I'm getting paid to get a college education. I'm getting the opportunity to work with some of the greatest artists in the world, and I'm getting paid for it. Now, I wasn't getting paid a lot, and later on in life, you decided, well, it would be nice to eat, and here's a really.
Oh, wait a minute, you got some bad habits. It's called paying bills.
Yeah, little things like that. But you'll love this one. So, there's a whole bunch of Jackson story, but I'll tell you that I walk in. And after doing one of the Jackson's mixes, and I go into the house of Bobby Colomby, who was the producer, and I'm walking in California, and Bobby loved me. I mean, who wouldn't love you? you just took a record that was dying. I took Blame It on the Boogie, and it went from 70 to 20, and then I took Shake Your Body, which was a total mistake, was not supposed to be released. And because of the errors that made it released, it was supposed to be sent to California to be destroyed and put in the, Iron Mountain. And instead, they sent it to Canada, to Dominic Zofka and Epic, who released it, and another place into the UK. And the import ended up coming into Butterball at WDAS in Philly, who put it, the reason that it wasn't supposed to happen is because nobody liked it. Epic said, we don't like this. I said, okay, I didn't care. Why I don't care if you like it. I know that I liked it, and I know I did a really good job, and I could sleep at night knowing that I didn't accept what was there or give you a little twist. Nobody comes to me when you want a little tweak. I'm the wrong guy. They don't call me Johnny Tweak. It's going to be, I'm a flash grenade, okay? And I'm going to give you the...
Well, honestly, you're really an engineer.
Yeah.
So what does an engineer do? They restructure and rebuild and refix or make the goddamn thing. So
now this record comes over here, right? And so they tell me, they said, don't release it. I said, I won't. My copy's sitting on my desk. And it's there. I still got it upstairs. And so it goes from Canada to England. England, the press that's okay. They called me Jim Luongo. There is no Jim Luongo, okay? I don't have a brother in England. But they put it on as Jim. And so Jim Luongo's record gets the DAS in Philly. Butterball at WDAS puts it on, who's the strongest, most powerful R&B programmer in the country. He's driving people crazy. The switchboard exploded. Joe told me, Joe Tambora was Butterball's name. He said, it blew up. He said radio stations were calling me. Retailers were calling me. Everybody was calling me. The record was going crazy. They wanted to know where to get it. The next day, I get a phone call from CBS. We're going to sue you. Why? Because we told you we didn't want that record out. I said, well, I hate to tell you, it's sitting right there. I'm looking at it. I didn't do a damn thing. So Joe Loris at Impact Magazine in Philly and Lenny Bach, who worked with them, they wrote the story of what really happened. 250,000 imports come into the United States. The record is killing it now. I get a phone call from my product manager, Cheryl Machat, who said, I got a call from Joe Jackson, who said to say to you, thank you for saving my son's career. Because Epic was going to drop them if this record didn't sell. And so first I had Blame It on the Boogie. I got that going again. And then I had Shake Your Body. Got that going again. So now I'm visiting in California, and Bobby invites me to his house. And then never forget, he has a giant, beautiful house, mansion. And he's got a big Bible, this big. I don't know why. I guess it's a big thing. You put a medieval Bible on there. And I said, this is the most beautiful house in the world. He said, well, you bought it for me. I said, what? He said, I said, what do you mean?
Say it one more time and say it with inspiration. What you mean? Say it again.
What do you say? My brother. So I found out that he got a multi-million-dollar house, and I got $250. But I still wasn't mad. I wasn't mad, Lenny, because when you're Italian, you don't get mad.
But here's the thing. You don't get mad. But you think about one door closing and another huge door opens. And these doors are opening big for you because people are visually seeing you're becoming the gold, you know, like the gold finger. You're touching something and it's turning into, you know, gold.
Yeah. And that was what I had. It was that sensibility that said to me, let's keep following this. Let's keep doing it. You know, I'm glad I didn't do it for the money. I mean, you know, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Some people say, yeah, you're full of it. No, I'm not. Because it would have changed you. If you do it for the love of what you're doing, and I still felt lucky every time I go in. I get sick every time I go in the studio because now all of a sudden I'm doing things in a row going #1 and I'm thinking, what the hell? You know, how do you, well, all you got to do is go in and beat a #1 record. So two things I used to combat that. One was I made sure I selected records that I thought I could really make better. And so I used my musical taste. And then I focused in on my ability, and then I would tell, like I told you, with Michael Barbiero and everybody, I'd say, look, I'm not going to fall into any comfortable position. We're not going to do what we did the time before because I do not want people to anticipate me. I never want a DJ to say he knows what I'm going to come out with. The only reputation I want from the DJ community is that if you have to pick up a record on a Friday night from the record pool and my name's on it, I want to be the only record that gets brought to be possibly played. And that's exactly what happened every single time. DJ said, when we saw John Luongo, we knew we had a really good chance of it being something special. So I used that to start building my reputation. And I went, you know, I did Nona Hendrix in the Cage. I ended up working with everybody in LaBelle. I work with Patti LaBelle on Music Is My Way of Life. I work with Nona Hendrix on Do What You Want to Do. I work with Sarah Dash on Taking Candy from a Baby. And I was able to realize every dream of every group I ever really wanted to work with. And the wonderful thing about what I did doing it my way over here, Len, was that I got allowed to do things in other genres that anybody else would have been pigeonholed, because they tried to keep me in dance, and I said no. I said, I don't make dance records. I make great records you can dance to. I said, there's a big difference.
Okay, yes. Tell me about a record that you loved, put everything you had into it, and it just didn't hit.
Let's see. It's hard because I did think of a couple of things. I guess I'm going to have to come back and think of that, because there were a couple of things that I thought should really have clicked. Well, I mean, one I did with Dan Hartman called Second Nature, I thought should have been a hit, but that wasn't a hit. And it just...
Because even as great as you are, you can't get it right every time.
No, you can't.
I mean, we want to show everybody there's a human side to you, too, that letdown feeling as well.
Oh, yeah, you feel bad. I mean, listen, I used to feel like, I used to feel terrible if I couldn't make a record a success. I mean, I was really lucky in that I get to work with so many different people and of all different genres. I mean, I think there may be other mixers in the world, like Tom, who have done, certain, possibly more. I've done about 5,000. But I would say, without a doubt, I don't think there's another mixer ever that's worked in more genres and had more success than me in everything. I'm talking about, you go from Blancmange to Ultravox to Visage to Bananarama to Junior to Aerosmith to Kiss to Van Halen to all these different groups. John Waite, Missing You, and the ones I did, they're still around today. I mean, it's great when you hear Missing You come on the radio, and I go, boy, I changed that whole thing. I sped it up. I added up the bell line to enhance the bell line. It was there. I took Gary Myrick's guitar and made it so much better. We popped John out. When I finished the record, I mixed it. I was editing it in my apartment on 322 West 57th Street, the 44th floor, and the window is open. And the doorman calls up and says, John? I said, yeah, Warren. He said, there's somebody below you that says he thinks there's a crazy person up there that keeps playing the same section of a song over and over and over again. And that was me trying to get it right to edit it. So when I finished, John Waite did not want to hear it because he was dating Nina Blackwood at the time. He said, she's going to come over and she's going to tell me how it is. So she comes over. She comes in my apartment where I'm editing. She gets on the couch and she sits on the top of the couch. It's a little wacky, but that's okay. She said, play it. I play it. She said, play it again. I played it again. She said, thank you. And she leaves. And I'm thinking, what is this? So he gets a call back and says, she fucking loves it. She thinks it's unbelievable. It's going to be number one. Sure as hell, the record went number one. And Russ Titleman, who was one of my favorite, with Quincy Jones, one of the greatest record producers ever, said, I took that record into an A&R meeting with Mo Austin, Michael Austin, Ted Templeman, and all of these guys. And he said, I'm going to show you the example of the value of what a great remix can be. Because nobody liked it on the album, including the president of EMI, Jim Mazza. They just didn't like it, and it wasn't that good. And when I finished it, it popped everywhere. It exploded. And we became best friends with Russ Titleman and other people. And I'm great. You got to be grateful. Really, Johnny. I mean, I keep calling you Johnny, but I love you, Lenny. The thing you realize is you got to be lucky. And yes, the harder you work, the luckier you get. But there's got to be a sense of luck involved in this too, because was some kid from Boston. All of a sudden, everything he kept doing, and I've always been able to change. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to know I have to be ahead of the curve. I'm never happy where I am. I'm either looking down there or looking over here or where's it going to go. I try to anticipate music, and I never get comfortable in music, because when you go in the studio and you try something new and you're completely uncomfortable, the process that you go through and being very uncomfortable doing something you've never done before and not familiar with, to find out how to bring it to a place that you are comfortable, that's greatness. That's where greatness comes in. Greatness is that process of taking an uncomfortable situation, mastering it, controlling it, and then owning it.
Perfect. And that's where I come to this question with Bryan Adams, but he didn't like what the hell you... The uncomfortability of Bryan Adams and you taking his record and speeding it up and doing all kinds of shit to make it what it is. Tell us the story.
So I had just finished working on this record for the Rays over there, for A&M Canada, and for Harry Kihn, a good friend of mine. The president of the record label was Jerry LaCourcier. So he says, John, he sends me a record. I still have the record. I'm gonna have to. I gotta put a museum or something together. I get the 7-inch. On one side, it has "Let Me Take You Dancing," the version that they tried to do. On the other side is a rock record. So I call up, and I love this record. I don't know what the hell it is. And I said, Jerry, I think I can make this better. I said, I really think I can turn this one into a hit. But I want to tell you, this kid has a future as a rock and roller. Hand to God, okay? And so they want me to do it in Canada. So I have to go to British Columbia. I go to Little Mountain Studios, okay? And I go up there, Bruce Fairburn's studio and everything. And, I'm flying in about 8 o'clock at night. And it's all dark. And I see the lights. And Harry picks me up. And I go to the studio. And I get off the plane, walk into the studio. And there I got Bryan Adams and Jim Vallance and Harry Kihn. So Jim Vallance, by the way, is the guy who wrote all the tracks with Bryan Adams. And he also wrote stuff for Bachman and Turner, Overdrive. The guy is a genius, unmitigated genius. And I'm listening to them, and I said, "Here's what I want to do, guys. We gotta make this record a little bit more powerful. We gotta spice it up." So I said, let's go in there and clap. So Jim Vallance, I, and Bryan Adams, let's go. Let's clap. So I'm having a clap session with future geniuses, right? And then I said, I would like to have some vibes put in this. So Jim, bing, 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 bing. Jim goes, a very talented musician, not only a writer. Then I get a sax player to come in, and I put a sax on there. Bryan played the percussion. Bryan played a little bit of the tambourine. I finished all the overdubs. I said, I have what I need. Now, Bryan brought me over to his house to meet his mother. He's like 16 years old. I walk in the house. I'm not much older than him. I'm going in there, and hi, Mrs. Adams. It's very nice to meet. Very meager little house, but you know what? Any house that has love in it's charming to me. It's beautiful. So I went in there, and I was sitting on the bed with him, and I said, Bryan, you're going to be a rock and roll star. I said, that's where you belong. But and I promise you're great. Take it back to New York. Now I'm listening, and I'm saying, it's just not. I'm in between the pocket. I'm in between the pocket of where I want it to be. What's going to bing, bing, as opposed to bing, ding, sluggish versus somebody playing it on top of it, on the beat. Push it forward. So I started speeding it up a little bit, and I said, I want to speed it up. Here's what I needed it to be. So I had my engineer, Michael, speed it up to the right point, and I said, okay, I like that. It wasn't much. It was like 0.3 or something. It wasn't a big deal. And then I said, I like it. Now we got it. And his voice was a little bit higher because we didn't have any of the time compression you have today, where you take a voice and it just compensates for speeding and kind of makes it smoother. But if you listen to all the records that come out on the radio, the people, they didn't have any time compression. Matter of fact, even with time compression, baby, Murphy's Law, all that stuff. So, long story short, I finish it. I know I got it. I know it's a hit. We send it out. Goes to Jerry LaCourcier. He loves it. He releases it. They get 25,000 copies and then 50,000 copies that are going into the U.S. now because it's such a big hit. I hear later that Bryan thought that it speeded up his voice and he sounded chipmunky. He did not sound chipmunky. He was 16 years old. So he already had the chipmunky in his voice because he was 16 years old. And at that point in time, the record was Came out, was a hit. Everybody loved, to this day, they still love the record. He didn't want to have it out because he didn't want to be associated with it due to the fact that he thought it might impair negatively on his career as a rock and roller. But without that record, A&M would not have signed him and let him do the album. And that's the truth. And Jim Valance will tell you that.
Here I am now with being a big Eagles fan myself.
Go ahead.
And
Go ahead.
loving Aerosmith. Don Henley you touched.
Yeah, I did.
And you worked on Aerosmith.
Yeah. By the way, I'm the only outside person that's ever worked on Aerosmith. Steven Tyler said, we will never let anybody touch any track.
And how did that happen that you became that one outside guy? Off the respect of the music, or they just loved what you did? What was the story behind that?
They were from Boston, and I was from Boston. And, we kind of always, people from Boston kind of keep an eye on each other and take care of each other. I can be anywhere in the world. I went to New York to become a success because I said I can't reach my full potential in Boston. If I could, I would have stayed there because I love the people, I love the town, very loyal to it all. But I knew I had to go to New York. And besides, you go to New York, you can make it there, you make it anywhere. Who knew? And everybody thought I was from New York after I lived there 20 odd years. So I get a phone call from Al Corey, who is the president of Geffen Records. John, yes? He said, we got this record, Dude Looks Like a Lady, and we can only get like 30 stations on it. I said, why? He said, well, I don't know, but we need more. He said, we need more stations in order to be able to break this record nationally. So we need you to get it on all of the urban stations. So I said, okay. So I listened to the track. We added a lot on that one. We had Phil Ashley. We had, who was a great keyboard player. The drums are reprogrammed on there. Even though we have some of the originals by Joey Kramer, I added drums to that thing. I added some keyboard parts. And I took risks on that record like I'd never taken before. I mean, Steven Tyler being soloed. Imagine my surprise, to the point where they were in Canada finishing the record, and Geffen needed me to send it to them. They had somebody, I had 2 days to do that record, which is complicated as hell. And they had a FedEx guy waiting for me to finish so I could give it to them to bring to Canada. I stayed up all night. I remember that I had like 1 hour sleep. I woke up again around, I think it was 4 in the morning, and just jumped on it and said, we really got to get this. The hardest part of that record was the arrangement, to make it really special and make sure it popped and make it couldn't be a record that sounded like a dance record. With John Cologne, who was the head of A&R for Geffen, said, Luongo, don't put any homo bells on this record. I said, okay, I'll make a point. I'll de-homo it. Stupid people. I get more stupid comments than people. And what he was saying is, don't make it too pretty. So I toughened it up. From the rock background I have, I'm working with my engineer Gary Hellman there. We had Joey playing really well. We had Joe Perry on one side. We had Tommy Hamilton playing the bass. I mean, Brad was guitar. There was split real wide. And I said, we're going to treat this like a rock record, but it's going to be so powerful that the clubs can't ignore it. So they get the record in Canada. I get a phone call the next day. I'm exhausted and I'm asleep. I remember I got woken out of bed. Steven Tyler left a message on my answering machine. Luongo, you crazy motherfucker. Man, this is just what I wanted. This is exactly what I wanted. You knew what to do with the DX7. By the way, Steven Tyler is playing that DX7 on that record himself, because he is a brilliant man. I mean, he went through a tough time with drugs and everything, but boy, you will be hard-pressed to find a more articulate, intelligent human being than him. And what he's going through now is sad, but the record came out. They picked up 185 stations, made the record go gold. Then it went platinum. And then after that, they gave me the next one. So I did Dude Looks Like a Lady, Ragdoll, Elevator, and boom. The rest was history. It went like, it was within a couple of years, it was 5 times platinum. Now I think it's about 10 or 20 times platinum. So.
Any writing credit to that with them? Did you do all those parts?
No, no. I could have. I definitely could have.
You're close enough. A little bit.
I almost did it.
A little bit.
Yeah, I almost did it. Lenny was close. But then I said, no, he'll kill me. I know Steven will stab me or something.
A little bit. A little bit. Now, with all this great fortune of love that's coming off the music, I do remember hearing, I think, if I remember correctly, you did play 54 in New York in Garage at one time. Did you get the chance to play in New York, or were you still playing back in Boston? Or
I was playing back in Boston. I went in Studio 54, and I was up there. Richie Kazel was up there, and we hung out. And I would hang out with Larry all the time. I never had the pleasure of playing there, but we were such close friends. I was such close friends with Larry Levan, and I just loved him because he's like Silent Man, and he didn't say anything, but boy, I'll tell you, he took a record of mine. He took a couple of records of mine, and he just exploded them. I gave him This Time Baby. He played it so friggin' much that Frankie Crocker took it off the turntable. I gave him You're Too Late by Fantasy. Well, he played like a half an hour version of that track, and the place went nuts. I would have great success there. He loved my track. He loved Zulu. Zulu by the Crick. That was one.
Oh my God, Zulu was a garage anthem.
That was
that bass line, the whole thing.
Yeah,
the whole thing.
That should have been a big hit. I really, it was a big hit.
See, that's it. There's your answer. That's the question.
I want Zulu to be number one in the world, and it will come back. We're due to have that back soon.
You run a pavilion, and also you have a record pool. And I do remember you did DOR as well, Dance Orientated Rock Pool, correct?
Yeah, we did. Actually, we invented.
Freddie Bastone was working at that time or not?
What?
Freddie Bastone, was he working for you yet?
Freddie was very started.
See how I remember everything? It's crazy.
I had Peter Napoliello, Jane Britton, Freddie Bastone, and Freddie was looking at me, and Debbie Marino, and all these great people, and Freddie used to be a pain in the ass. I said, because he would be in there looking at me editing. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I just want to see what you're doing." I said, "Get back on the freaking phone." We had Pavilion Alternative Radio promotion. So that was I was always a step ahead. Like, this you'll appreciate. Dennis McNamara for WLIR, right? Well, Dennis, when he would do these Screamers of the Week, later on, I'd be calling him in the Screamers of the Week from the UK. I'd say, "Hey, Denny, we got Thompson twins coming over here. Doctor. Okay, let's put that one on." And so I would tip him off on the Screamers, and we became best of friends. And then it didn't hurt that I was working on the records anyway, like OMD and Blancmange and all these other groups, Psychic TV. And I worked on Soft Cell. I worked on The. There's so many different diverse bands that I worked on. And the Rock Pool was a really important time. You had Mark Josephson over there. It really had some great. We had the Major Thinkers. We had computer games by My Sex. I mean, it was fun. The difference, Lenny, that I see today is a lot of these things are pretty much going back and forth, and they're not changing that much. The electronic rock music that came out, you'd hear like Duran Duran. This is Planet Earth. I mean, you'd hear this, Psychedelic Furs. You would hear David Byrne. There was like such a diversity. Here it's like, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I think musically we're in a kind of a confused state. I think this AI trash. Look, AI's going to be good at the right time. But it's not good right now for me to say, I like a alternative rock song that steals from every group in the world and comes out, and then it plays something, and I'm going to put my name in it. Now, just so you know, if you do an AI version of anything, you can't copyright it. You cannot own that. You can own what you do, but anybody can take it, and you can't sue them or anything.
That's right, because you didn't write it.
That's right. You didn't do anything.
The robot
did it,
The robot could sue you, but here's something I want you to share.
Okay.
What it's like to be an A&R man. because you played that role as well.
Yeah, I was. You know what? I was going to be the head of A&R for Chrysalis, and you know why I didn't do it? The reason I didn't do it was because Joe Kihn, who he was from he ran a sneaker company. It was Reebok, and they wanted me to run it after Jeff Aldridge was going to leave, and I said no, because I was afraid that if I went in-house and became a corporate person,
like Danny Glass and all the rest of the guys did. Yep.
Because I'd start saying things that carried the company on water, and I would change who I was. So here's what I did as an A&R person. So you'll love this stuff. So I'm starting Pavilion. Listen, we all make mistakes, and I had so much on me. I'm the youngest president in the history of the music business of a major CBS record label. Do I know what I'm doing? No. Did I ever know what I'm doing? No, not in the beginning. I never know what I'm doing. But you jump in. The thing I learned, and I would give advice to everybody, never say no. Lenny, can you manufacture nuclear energy in your home? Why?
100%.
Okay.
Yes.
Matter of fact, here it is. I got the nuclear energy machine. So you never say no to anybody. And so now I'm learning how to be a record executive, which is a pain in the ass because when you're a creative person, you want to be in the streets, you want to talk that language, you want to have that coming in your head. You don't want to deal with the board meetings and everything. So I signed the first couple of acts. I signed Barbara Law. Had some Eds, didn't do so good. I signed Jimmy Mail. He did pretty good, not great. And then I was starting to get my feet under me. So now I got Fantasy. I said, okay. So I bring them this group early on that I got from Ellie Greenwich, who's one of the greatest songwriters of all time, lived in the building with me where I lived in New York, and used to take me up to her apartment to try to teach me things because she said, kid, you can maybe change the music business. And I loved her for that. And so she plays me the song, and she said, could you come and see this person perform with me, a Catch a Rising Star? I said, absolutely. So I go, and it is, I watch the girl perform. I bring it to CBS. I got a tape. I said, I want to sign her. No. Patti Smythe. I said, you don't want to sign her? No. Meanwhile, Patti Smythe later goes on to be Scandal, sings with Don Henley. Doesn't do too bad for herself. Now I get another group. I get this black group out of New York, and they got bowler hats, and I meet a guy named Steve Salem, and I said, I love these guys. This could be the next Cool in the Gang. So I want to bring them to CBS because they had to approve it first. That's what I'd never do again. Next time if I did anything, you have no approval. You either live with me and die with me, or you don't get me. So I bring it up, and they said, well, this is black. Duh. Yeah, you're right about that. I said, but I came from Boston. This is the music I grew up with, all this stuff. No, we hired you to do dance. We want you to bring us dance. We don't want this. Well, that's full force. The group goes on to produce Samantha Fox. They have a gigantic album, 2 of them on their own, multi-platinum. They bring in Lisa, so another one by the boards. Then I bring him another one. And my friend Steve-O Pierce from the UK said, Lou, he used to call me Lou. I met him when he was up there on one of my trips working with Blancmange, and he stayed at his house. He said, I'm going to give you something, but I can only give it to you for the US and Canada. I said, okay. So I listened to it. I said, I love this. And I go into CBS, and I'm playing it for Tony Martell and Gordon Anderson. And they can't hear it. I'm saying, but this is a hit. Let me sign this. Oh. That's Soft Cell, Untainted Love, 6 million copies. So now I'm getting a little pissed. Italian, getting mad.
Yeah, but how do you go back to them and show them that, hey, you bring that to them again and say now, hey, guys, this just did 6 times.
Because these all happened so fast, Lenny. These were within a couple of months. CBS I could have exploded. I would have revolutionized. I would have been just killing it over there. It would have been one of like the top independent labels in the country. And so I didn't even get a chance to go back and show them what was happening. Because as soon as they passed on everything, then I had to go. They would find out later that I was right. Now I bring in another one. Mark Kamens has me come down to Danceteria to something he's working on. I listened. I said, I love this. This is great. Can I meet the girl? I go down. He said, yeah, I'll bring it down tomorrow. She came down. I'm dancing with her at Danceteria. Russell Simmons is in the booth. Michael Rosenblatt's in the booth. And Mark Kamens. I said, I love it. Mark, come over to my house. He comes over to my house. I said, let's have a toast that I will bring this to CBS on Monday, and I will tell them I want to sign this. I get a phone call Saturday or Sunday night, about 8 o'clock, and the girl tells me that she's behind in rent and needs money for food. And I did not want to screw her because she had a firm offer on the table from Sire for $6,000. So I said, I understand, Madonna. You got to do what you got to do. So that was the last straw. And then I spoke to Ron Weisner, who I worked on records for Gladys Knight and the Jacksons for, and he said, we can sign one person. We can sign Franjo Lee on Madonna. I said, well, you got to go on Madonna. I said, I'm telling you, there's a future. I know. I wanted it myself. He signs her. He brings me to L.A. to listen. He said, what do you think? And I'm listening to Like a Virgin by Nile Rodgers, and I'm listening to that album, and I'm saying, this is out of here. So he loved me as a friend, but I didn't make anything on that. But, you know, sometimes just being right is a very powerful thing. And I was right on all of those. I just, you know, you had an ear. But after that, thank God I got like Zulu, and then I got Fantasy. So, you know, and then I left. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And they wouldn't let me out of my deal. You know why? Because they were afraid that if I left and I had a hit with somebody, they'd look bad. So I said, well, you said I can't do records in the U.S. and Canada. But you didn't say I can't do them overseas. And that's when I went and found Blancmange and worked with them and worked with Ultravox and Blue Rondo, and everybody over there became great friends. And I even worked with Cabaret Voltaire.
All great, and they all did great.
Yeah, they all did good. I know you're exhausted, Lenny. I know it is.
No. No. I have this question that I've had for many, many years, and I wanted to ask you, I've always wanted to ask you this. With the You're Too Late Fantasy record,
yeah,
the album and that record, about a year prior, Mel Sharon releases Spark, Let's Go Dancing. Very similar in sound.
Yeah.
Did you realize that at the time, or you just heard You're Too Late and said, I want to grab this?
I just heard You're Too Late and I knew it. I heard it. Tony Valla came up. I said, let's work on this one. I think this is going to pop. I just knew it. I didn't listen to the Mel Sharon one at all, but I knew that I had something there, and I did. You know, it was
because when you hear them, You're Too Late's got that feeling like, let's go dancing, let's go there tonight. And Larry used to play both those records, both of them.
You play them together.
Yeah, and that's why I was wondering if
no, I didn't get any influence by the Spark record whatsoever. But I love Mel Sharon. He was one of
no, he was great, great A&R man,
great guy,
crazy and great.
Yeah, another Boston boy. You see, we stick together, Lynn.
Skepta Records.
That's it. Wand Records.
Wand.
Roadshow. Come on and do it.
Do it. Do it. Do it till you're satisfied. And Peace Pipe and all those records. Yes. I can't thank you enough. I mean, there's so much. The accomplishments that you have laid down. Some people never understand that, especially working with all these artists. But was there one artist that said, John, I don't get it? And even after the success of the record, they still didn't like it.
Well, let's see.
Because you always get one, they go, yeah, I know it did great. But I just wasn't feeling it.
I have to say, for the most part, I mean, I actually, for the most part, I think most of them really were appreciative because I held their hand and I told them, trust me on this. This is gonna be, you know, I use my reputation and my ability. I can talk to artists because I'm a creative person who loves creative persons and I know how to deal with them. I've had artists cry on me. I've had artists falter. One artist I was about to do her whole album, but she went off the deep end, sadly. Irene Cara. She was one of my best friends. And I was going to record her album for Network Records. We were all set up. I went to the studio in California. I flew in. I'm ready. And she never showed up. She just disappeared. She went doolally. And that was sad. She passed away. She was a great girl. And I feel bad that She was such a talented, wonderful individual. Could have been so much bigger, but I think she succumbed to a lot of the pressure of the industry. Some people, you know, this business can drive you crazy. You know, I mean, people can get so emotionally pressured by this business that it affects them physically. I mean, it's all or nothing. I mean, you are forced, no matter what stage you are, to perform and be and look for people's praise and approval. You know, you're always doing that. I mean, you know, I try to do it when I'm out there. I mean, I know when I'm doing something. I used to throw up before I go into the session sometime, and that's the truth. I go, oh Jesus, how much pressure I got on me, because sometimes it drives you crazy. I mean, you might not have heard this, but like I would talk to Tommy Silverman and other people, and they say, why don't you come out with us? And they said, nah, I don't feel like coming out tonight. I had such pressure on me, Lenny, to have to do great things all the time, or self-imposed, that if I hadn't done a record within a month that wasn't successful or didn't mean anything or I didn't create anything, that I felt like I wasn't worth anything. I mean, that can really put you in the nut house, you know?
Yeah. And how did you sit down and meditate one day and say, I can't live like this anymore? When was the change that happened?
I just said to myself, I said, you know what? You got to realize that what you're doing is really special and unique, and it is pressure packed, and you have set a bar so high that every time you get this, now you know it's got to go here and here and here. And if you deal with that all the time, that can drive you crazy. So I finally realized, I finally got to the point in my life, I said, you know, take a deep breath, do the best you can, never take anything for granted, always deliver for people, and don't ever turn to a point in your life where you'll do lesser in order just to put something out. And that's when I came to the realization that it's better to slow down at certain things than to keep trying to put the pressure on you, because sometimes you try to do something that you think is better, and maybe the project isn't as good as you thought it was, and that can hurt you. So I learned to temper my expectations. I still want greatness from myself to this day. Everything I do, we have a licensing company for film and TV. We're considered the best. We're going to do the Time 100 this year. We're clearing all that music for them. And I thrive in a situation where I know that I know something so well that people who are really great come to us and we can talk on their level. That became my diversion. Is I love to know that I can have a conversation with the smartest person in the world on another area that I'm not the smartest person in the world with yet, but given time and putting the effort into, I will be able to be as smart as them. I will be able to be competent. And I like that. I like having fun. As soon as you see me laughing and stuff, you know that I've mastered it, because I like to master things. I don't want to ever be a jack of all trades. I refused to be somebody that can do this and do that. I said, I got to be the best mixer in the world. I want to be the best editor in the world. I want to be one of the greatest producers in the world. I want to be one of the finest people at overdubs. I want to be able to pick music. I want to be able to license music. I want to be able to save people whose royalties who got screwed. I being one of them, I found out how to save my ass on certain things, and I put those to use. And so helping other people in the areas, that's a way to relax.
And that's when I was going to ask this question before I wrap.
Yeah.
Okay. When did you realize to put the magic wand away and get the sword?
Oh, that happened.
To become the guy, the royalties, because again, magic wand was the fairy tale dust, right, and all the stuff that went on in the 70s and the 80s, and then you're going into the 90s. But when did that magic wand go away and valedictorian sword comes out?
That's a very good point. When the magic wand went away was when people started to do mixes, and they, instead of paying you real fees, they had all these people do it in the box for $250, and these people. I said, what are you talking about? $250 for a mix? This is like they were basically, the music business always screws themselves. they try to pay as least as they can pay, the least amount of money they can pay, so they can get something for it. But you know, you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. And what happened is they started doing all these terrible records, these terrible remixes. 85% of all the remixes that come out are garbage. Let's be honest about it. If I hear another record that starts like that, I'm going to kill myself, okay? This is the best you can do. A record, you wham! You should be looking at Earth, Wind, and Fire or something. Start with some energy and power. So when I started to see that you couldn't make money doing what I did, it was no longer valued as a really valued producer thing, I said, well, okay, so if you can't do that, how about we just see if we can get paid for what we did do? How about if we can find out the new rules and regulations so I can turn that wand into a sword? And that's what I did. And I became, I don't know if you ever heard of Sound Exchange, but Sound Exchange collects the digital performance royalties for artists. I was one of the first consultants with them in the world. And they didn't have anybody wanting to sign up with them. The reason being, Lenny, is because people thought there wasn't really money there. They thought it was a scam. But there is money. You know, when you play money on Pandora or Spotify or one of these other platforms, digital, you do get money for that. So I learned it. I helped Sound Exchange sign up all these artists like Jennifer Hudson, John Travolta, The System. I got Ambrosia. All these people were signing in, even Santana's brother, you know, Malo. And I said, you know, there's something here. So I finally got to a point where I said, I can represent people, and I know how to not only go into this system and study it, I know it so well that I can get more out of it than anybody else. And we now represent Marlena Shaw Estate, Dan Hartman Estate, Curtis Hairston, Christine Wiltshire. I got people from we got Lynn Collins and her estate. These are all my heroes and fans. I got people from James Brown's Flames, Bobby Bennett, Bobby Eli, who did MFSB, and God bless his heart. You know, he was one of the greatest writers, producers of all time. Carl Helm, who did all the stylistic stuff, and more coming on. You know, I only take certain people that I really believe I can help. So I've been able to turn that into a productive thing that allows me to feel like I'm helping people and giving back to them the way that nobody ever gave back to me. And that's how that's going.
So everyone realize this. John is institutionalized from the early part, running a record pool in the beginning. And then towards the end of the other side of the spectrum, he's now on the Grammys panel, helping for that. Yep. He doesn't mention that. He forgets about that part, how he helped organize that section. And how, of course I know what Sound Exchange is, because anyone that makes records knows this is part of the exchange. You know, you have your BMI, you have your ASCAP, you have PPL, you have Harry Fox, all these societies that collect, but there's the digital side of things now, and thankfully people like him have their swords out and keeping these estates find the money that's out there, because that money is around.
It is, and it's great to see. It's great. You got to see people. It's a great feeling when somebody cries that hasn't gotten paid. I can tell you about people that did records and hadn't gotten a dime in 25 years.
No, you're seeing. Okay, so one good thing about Facebook and say Instagram, people from 3, 4, 5 generations, decades ago, I should say generations, too long, it's 75, 100 years. Okay, from the 60s and 70s are writing, I did not do drugs. I did not squander my money. I got one payment. I wrote the record, and it went 10 times platinum. You hear a lot of that now. And people showing the gold record or the platinum record and saying, I was not what they want you to think.
No. And you know what the problem with that is? A lot of these people, they might have wrote it, but they didn't get it down. They were so busy, and you can't fault them. It's really hard to fault somebody who does something because they love it. You know, they're doing it because they love it, and they don't know that in order to claim that recording, you have to have a copyright. You have to be down there on the registration. So you can say, I wrote it, but my name's not there. You lose. You can be right, And there's right, and then there's just unjust, and it's too bad.
And that's where it falls under the unjust part.
Yeah.
So there's, like you are now backtracking for some of these older acts, trying to, go past the 7-year look back.
Yeah, absolutely.
And trying to open that door, because that's all we're allowed to look back.
That's right.
Technically.
And that's a terrible thing right there. And they call it because the statute of limitations has run out. You are sucking the big Mussolini there. It's
right. So if you had millions of dollars in publishing, you can't. It goes into that black box,
and it gets distributed after so many years, like after 10 years or something. Say, well, nobody there. Okay, here's the plot. Let's put it out to everybody, and we'll do it by. If you've made this much, you get that percentage. If you made this much, you get a little percentage. But the money's all gone, and you have no recourse as the artist or the producer or the publisher. So it's hard. I mean, I hate saying it sometimes because I have to tell people I got to give them terrible news, but I won't lie to them. Well, now you're depressing.
And how do you deliver that news? Oh. Sit down. I got to tell you something.
I said, look. I'm honest with them. I said, here's the reality of it all. It may not be just. It may not be right. It certainly isn't fair. But here's what the reality is. As long as you deal with reality, I think a lot of people appreciate that they can resolve it and know, yes, there's something there. No, there's not something there. There's such a power, Lenny, in knowing that you look down every door and you look behind it to see if there's anything in there and then closing it. You can move on with some kind of dignity if you know you at least investigated. Because so many people, they got such a crazy misrepresentation. I had 5,000 plays on YouTube. That won't even buy you a penny. You're not going to get anything. You need hundreds of millions. You need multi-millions. You need billions, and then you can start making some money. But you should at least, the one thing I would encourage everybody who's doing this today or trying to do it, understand how you make money. Because if I took everybody that listens to your show and they said, okay, I'm going to put you in a room, you're not going to have anybody look at to the left or to the right. 100% of you, show me how you actually make money and how much money you think you make. You would be lucky if 5% of them can answer that question. That's the way it goes. Because people don't realize it's the music business. They're so busy in wanting to, well, I'm going to wear this on stage and I'm going to do that and I'm going to get this done. That means nothing. Means nothing. How do you make $1? How can you make $1?
Well, nowadays I'm seeing young producers are just signing all rights over with everything just to get something out there because they want a gig. And they're just signing over. They don't care. They don't really care about the business sense, the writing, the publishing. They just sign it. Send the contract over. These words, perpetuity, are in there forever and ever and ever and ever and ever till ever, ever, ever.
And then 3 days put. You won't.
Correct.
It's so true. You're not gonna. You should value what you have a little bit more. Look, if people always complain about Spotify, we don't get fair. We don't get treated fair. We don't get any money. We don't get. We don't have any say in what we make. Well, let me tell you. Oh, great complainers, what the problem is. The problem is that you give your music to Spotify because you don't have the courage to hold it back and say, I want to get treated fairly. So I'm not going to give you this to put up there. Because you know why? Because they have egos this big, and their egos say to them, I need a place for people to go see my music. I need them to see a picture of me. I want them to push a button. Go to Spotify and see how great I am. Their egos are the downfall of the artistic community. If the artists ever band it together and say, no, you don't get my music anymore until we have a seat at the table, then things would change. But they don't have the courage to be able to get, to be able to hold off on getting that little pat on the back of, oh, you're so wonderful. Get the hell out of here. You got, at the end of the day, you got
go shine those shoes.
Yeah.
He makes those shoes shiny. Get the hell out of here.
Get out of here, you stupid kid.
I didn't tell you he shines those shoes pretty good, huh?
Good, John. You want, Lenny, you want my shoes? Do them.
But John, this is just, this is the nature of the beast. It's the hamster in the wheel. You keep going away, going to nowhere.
Well, look, let me ask you.
Nowhere to run, nowhere to hop.
How have you seen it change in the ways when you started and did all this stuff? I mean,
well,
the value of what you do and everything.
Okay,
It's great. You tell the people that.
I come off the back end of you, the brick and mortar business. So when I started, we still had a vinyl generation. Simply meaning that what they sell now, say 300, 400, 500 units, or maybe 1,000 or 2,000 units, and that's like a crazy hit.
Yeah.
We did promotion on just free goods, if not more than that, if you remember.
I sure do.
Okay. We complained about how much we were getting, 8 cents per unit, whatever it was.
Yeah.
But you had a serious check.
Yeah. No more.
Now you feel like your record at that time would last 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years. You had a big record.
Yeah.
If you get 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 3 days, people are telling me 3 days. I had spoken to Junior, who you worked from the UK. We said, he says, Lenny, no, mate, 3 days on a single now. I'm like, so imagine the amount of energy and work that you and Michael did, or Steve Thompson mixing a record, or David Morales, or whoever, Frankie Knuckles, or Tom Moulton, all that work and time of setting up the record for it to come out and go in 3 days. It's like, it's hard to ingest this.
It is.
When you come from an older way of, how do I deal with it? I mean, sometimes I say this, John. I wish I didn't know what I know. Because it's hard to accept the way things are. We do accept it, but it's hard to ingest it and accept.
Yes, it is. Yeah. That's
you understand what I mean by that? It's very difficult.
Very sadly, I do, because it's like you can see just by the way you're reacting. It's an emotional thing for you too, because you have bills to pay. You have people to support and things to do, and you want to do something you love. And the key is, if you want to do something you love, you would like to at least believe that if you put in the work that you should, and you put in all the effort and energy, that it will reward you by allowing you to have a sustainable living. But that's not a guarantee anymore. There's no guarantee you will stay alive in this business. There's no guarantee of success. There's no guarantee of multiple successes or multiple releases that do good. Everything is you start from zero and have to work your way up in every single thing you do. And that's not easy, and it takes a lot out of you to be able to start from scratch, knowing nothing you do will build. Even if you have a success, you're going to enjoy that success and know it's hard to parlay that like you could before. You can't do that like you did in the past. And that's frustrating for you and so many other people, Len.
Well, because what happens is you get flags along the way. And these flags feel reminiscent to what you know.
Yeah.
But they're false flags. It's like, that doesn't mean the same it was back then.
Nope.
No, don't disregard, once again, erase the membrane of everything we know and just act like it didn't exist. And this is the new de facto. Spotify is our dream come true. You could do it yourself. You don't need A&R people. You don't need you can wear all the hats. I think that's the biggest mistake, because what happened in our world is you took away the people, even though they may not have been right, but they helped you to carve out those successes along the way.
I'm telling you, what I'm forced to do all the time is every 5 years, about 4 or 5 years, I'm forced to completely revamp myself. I bring myself down to nothing. I have to learn to love what I hate and hate what I love. I find things that I'm not loving, and I look at them and I say, okay, what's the value in here? Let me see what I have to do to make it sustainable. Let me use something in there. I'll learn something, and that's where I'm grateful for my engineering degree, because I can put things in an orderly file. You know, I mean, people say to use your engineering degree in the music business. I said every day. I said, because I can file out orderly when it's on fire. I can get you all out of that building safely and orderly when it's burning, because of the logic and the instinct and the engineering background that I have. And that's what you have to do. You got to learn to be adaptable. You got to be a chameleon. You have to know that what you loved and what you enjoyed 3 or 4 years ago is gone, and it will be gone. And if it isn't gone, you should be fortunate enough to start preparing for it to go, so it won't be a surprise. Because change is the only constant that we live with in this business. Constant change, constant reevaluation, new rules, new regulations, publishing this and that. It's like it's a Ferris wheel. It's crazy.
So you mean pragmatic is definitely not in the
No.
Get rid of pragmatic. Get rid of all.
No, you can't have a pragmatic anything. Forget it.
Don't prepare. Don't be pragmatic. No. Just roll with the punches.
Go with the punches. That's it. You're on a
John Luongo. What an education. So remember, everybody, when you throw out all the old clothes, throw out all the old thoughts, reset yourself like a spring cleaning, and be prepared for change. One thing is definitely constant. Come April, you'll have to pay your tax bills. That will never change. Right. The other part is, and the undertaker will come at the end. But for now, enjoy the music that we're getting, because you don't know when it's going to be the last.
That's right.
Right? And keep believing in what you do.
Yep.
John Luongo, you're a hero.
Well, I love you. I love
what you did. What you did in your career cannot be duplicated. There's not many that could say the amount of accomplishments, the heights you've hit, without even realizing that you were going to do this. Like, you had no plan. You just jumped in.
No, definitely. This is definitely jumping the net.
This is a no plan action. Like, you were like, nah.
You know that career path you thought you were going to have? Like, no.
No military.
Yeah.
No, go work for, a big architectural firm later on. I'm going to do this music thing. It's because it's a phase. Phase became the career.
And if you think about it, Len, the thing that's really interesting is there were no record pools. I mean, we started in New York, Long Island, and Boston.
No, you got to tell the truth. You had Ronnie Coles at Colony.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Ronnie says that he influenced David Mancuso, or he was the one that put that together, but I wasn't around at that time. But so what I know is David Mancuso doing 99 Prince Street record pool, and a lot of great people came out from that pool to start other pools. Jackie, Eddie Rivera, Bobby Davis, Gene Satiris. I mean, there were so many guys. Bill Rickett.
Sure.
And the names go on. I mean, this, Dixie Pool came after. You were around at the same time. Judy Weinstein, who was the secretary for David Mancuso, makes For the Record.
Yeah.
Again, this was, you guys are writing the rules as you go.
Yeah, it was interesting. What is it? We didn't know what a record pool was. We just said, we'll just do this. First radio show. I had the first radio show, dance radio show in the country.
How's that work? What do you mean radio show? What do you mean? Non-stop mix?
Yeah, I was the first. I mean, you can say this and you can say to people, they go, well, that's not possible. Yeah, it's possible. I had a show called The Right Track at WTBS, and it came on before a show called The Ghetto. It came on we were on from 10 to 12. And after me, it was all black. The Ghetto was all the black students over there at WTBS. And I went on the radio. I played all these records. I used to go The Right Track, music that's making America dance. And all of the DJs all over Boston, in New England, would listen to the show. And so would the black station, WILD, the pop station, WABC, WRKO, and WMEX. And they would listen, and they would program the stations. Even the progressive station back then, which is WBCN, would listen and program. But I had a section, I call it Segue Serenade. I'd take songs live on the freaking radio and mix them live as the show going on. It was a 20-minute section, so people could get an idea of what these songs sounded like live. There's big Strombolinis for you, you know, where you don't care if you make a mistake in front of people. I had my show, I had a 2,500 person capacity at Whimsy's in Boston, and because I couldn't be on the radio because I was doing that gig, the program director of WBOS said, well, we'll put on 2 hours of you. So for 2 hours, my live show, everything I mixed live, was going out at WBOS 98 FM. So we started more things than anybody knows. Nightfall Magazine had the first dance award.
Yeah, I know. And Nightfall Magazine was your baby too. I know that.
So yeah, we did a lot of firsts, and you know, they were just natural progressions. It wasn't like an attempt to. I said, well, this makes sense. Let's try this.
So maybe you can clear this up for us here.
Or maybe not.
Or maybe not. Since now, what year would you say this master mixing was going on? This beginning master mixing or serenade to the, you know, the whole thing. When would it begun for you on the radio?
Trying to think. It was 76, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. In New York, we get to hear for the first time master mixing. If I remember correctly,
yeah.
He's no longer with us.
Huh?
Ted Currier.
Oh yeah, I remember Ted. Very good.
Sweetheart.
Good kid.
Great guy. Went on to do Atomic Dog, and you know he did all that stuff and worked at the record label and the whole thing, Capitol and blah blah blah. But there was no master mixing yet until Ted Currier in New York came on. You know what I'm saying? So I'm wondering, did someone was influenced from Boston radio?
I think
New York?
I think they. Our station would get at night. You had to shut off all the signals of certain stations. We would get across to New York and Maryland.
Oh, you would get that far?
Yeah, we got. It was a 15 watt radio station, but because of the signal at night, we could get hundreds of miles. Hey, you know you got to.
I'm telling you. There was a Spanish station on AM radio that started playing disco in New York.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, we heard this disco thing nonstop mixing, or they called it blending, with Ted Currier.
See?
Disco 92. Okay?
Learning a lot here, see?
Disco 92 with Ted Currier. That was a big moment in New York radio. So I'm just wondering if somehow, you know, because Boston, New York, they're not far from each other.
No,
they're not that far.
We used to have, let me tell you, when I threw the awards, Jelly Bean would come, Ken Nix, Tommy Silverman. Tom Silverman got the idea for Dance Music Report from Nightfall. Okay, he'll tell you. There was no like this, oh, let's try that. No, it's like he saw me. I was doing it. He used to come up all the time, and I love him. He's a great friend. And I don't care. I mean, it wasn't stealing. It's like, you know, borrow it. Go ahead. Because I'm going to cheat.
No, it was stealing.
It was stealing. You no good pig. No, I love him.
Well, Tom talks it always well, too. Tom talks about how payola envelopes had to be handled to get certain records on radio, thankfully. He clearly told us. We know that, but he told us how much was in those envelopes on this show.
Tom, you little devil, you.
Now, can I leave this excerpt with you, and can you verify it?
Go ahead.
This comes from John at the 1978 National Disco Awards.
Dear God.
In quotations, the day disco dies is the day people stop dancing. And people aren't about to do that. There will always be disco in one form or another.
Amen. I stand by that, and it's true, and it will never go away. You can't kill it. They tried to blow it up in Chicago. You go eat your own eggplant, pal, because we're going to be around as long as we're fresh and creative, and we make people happy. So take that, baby.
And that, my friends, brothers and sisters, MFSB, mother, father, sister, brother, all of it. Right there from John Luongo.
Great,
the man himself.
Thank you very much for this opportunity with all your people, and God bless them all. And keep dancing, never quit. Don't let anybody tell you what you can't do. Only you know what you can't do.
And that's it, everyone. Come back again and visit us to see your favorite heroes, Super John Luongo, right here on True House Stories. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.